What if the moment that changed your entire life happened over a $14.75 check? What if the man sitting in booth 9, the one who ordered black coffee and scrambled eggs, was worth $4 billion? And what if the girl who slid that check across the table recognized the signature he left behind? Not because she'd seen it on a Forbes cover, not because she'd Googled him, but because she had seen that exact same handwriting on a birthday card every single year, until the cards stopped coming. This is not a rags to riches story. This is not a fairy tale. This is a story about what happens when the life someone abandoned walks right back into their world and asks them to leave a tip. Stay with me, because I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this story, you will never look at a stranger the same way again. Cedar Falls, Ohio, population 38,000. The kind of town where everybody knows your car, knows your order at the diner, and definitely knows your business, whether you want them to or not. On the corner of Maple and 5th Street sat HThe's Diner, a place that had been feeding this town for over 40 years. Cracked vinyl booths, a jukebox that only played songs from before 1987, and the best apple pie within a 100-mile radius. At least, that's what the hand-painted sign in the window claimed. Working the morning shift that Tuesday was Maya Calloway, 24 years old, single mother to a 4-year-old boy named Theo, part-time community college student, full-time everything else. Maya had been waitressing at HThe's for 3 years, ever since she'd moved back to Cedar Falls from Columbus, after her life had quietly, then suddenly fallen apart. She wasn't bitter about it, or at least she'd gotten very good at pretending she wasn't. She had a routine. She showed up, she smiled, she refilled coffee. She went home, fed Theo, studied until midnight, and did it all over again. She did not think about her father. Or at least, she tried not to. You see, Maya's father, Richard Calloway, had left when she was 9 years old. No dramatic argument, no tearful goodbye. One morning he was there, the next his closet was empty, his car was gone, and the only thing he'd left behind was a note on the kitchen table that said, "I'm sorry, I'll explain when you're older." She was never given an explanation. He did send birthday cards. Every year on March 14th, a card would arrive in the mailbox. No return address, just her name, her age, and his signature at the bottom. Always the same signature, a looping R, a sharp C, and an underline beneath it like a river cutting through stone. The cards stopped when she turned 18. Maya had spent years telling herself she didn't care. She had almost convinced herself. Now let's talk about the man who walked into HThe's Diner at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday. Robert Calloway, 61 years old, silver-haired, quietly dressed in a charcoal blazer and dark jeans, the kind of outfit that cost more than most people's rent but was designed to look like it didn't. He drove a rental car, not a limousine. He chose a corner booth, not a window seat. He ordered coffee, black, and the scrambled egg plate, same as he always did in places like this. Because Robert Calloway, known in business circles as RJ Calloway, chairman and CEO of Calloway Capital Group, a private equity firm managing assets in excess of $4 billion, had a habit that his board of directors found deeply peculiar. Once a month, he ate alone, in a diner, in a small town. No assistant, no security, no phone calls, just coffee, eggs, and whatever was left of his conscience. His chief of staff had once asked him why. He had looked at her for a long moment and said simply, "It keeps me honest." She had not pushed further. People who worked for RJ Calloway quickly learned which questions he would answer and which ones would close a door you couldn't reopen. What none of his employees knew, what almost nobody on earth knew, was that Robert's choice of small towns was never random. He had a list, 16 towns across 7 states. He had lived near each of them at some point in the years after he left, and each one held something he could never bring himself to return to and could never bring himself to entirely abandon. Cedar Falls was at the top of the list, because in Cedar Falls lived the daughter he had walked away from 32 years ago, when she was 9 years old and he was a man drowning in shame and running from it at 100 miles an hour. He had never stopped driving, but he had also never stopped circling back. He did not know Maya worked at this diner. He had hired a private investigator years ago, not to make contact, but simply to know she was safe. The last report, 8 months old now, said she had moved back to Cedar Falls, had a son, was working and studying. He had read that report 4 times. He had not commissioned a new one. He told himself it was because she deserved her privacy. He did not examine that thought too closely. Maya's section was the back half of the diner, booths 6 through 12. She was refilling the coffee at table 8 when she noticed the man in booth 9 for the first time. Her first impression? Quiet, composed, the kind of person who had learned to take up exactly the space they needed and no more. She'd seen that type before, usually older businessmen passing through on their way to somewhere else. She grabbed her notepad and walked over. He ordered without looking up. She wrote it down and walked away. For 40 minutes, nothing happened. Robert ate his eggs. He read something on his phone. He refilled his own coffee from the carafe Maya had left at the table. Maya moved between her tables, took 2 more orders, dealt with a customer who insisted his pancakes were too round, and thought about whether Theo had eaten his breakfast that morning. She did not think about the man in booth 9 until it was time to bring the check. She printed it at the register, tucked it into a small black folder, and carried it to his table. She set it down. He thanked her. She started to turn away. He opened the folder and reached into his jacket pocket for a pen. Maya was 3 steps away when she saw it, not a sound, but something in her peripheral vision. The way he clicked the pen, the way his wrist moved as he signed. She stopped. She told herself not to look. She looked. She couldn't see the full signature from where she stood, just the beginning of it, a looping R, a sharp C, and the beginning of an underline that cut beneath the letters like a river cutting through stone. The diner sounds fell away. The jukebox, the clinking plates, all of it. Maya's hands got cold. She had seen that signature 16 times in her life, once a year from ages 2 to 18, on birthday cards she still kept in a shoebox under her bed. She turned around slowly. She looked at the man in booth 9, silver-haired, 60, maybe 61, quiet eyes that were, when he looked up and found her staring, a very familiar shade of gray, her own eyes. The folder slipped slightly in her hands. She caught it. She opened her mouth. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Sir, that's my father's signature." Silence. The entire diner seemed to hold its breath. Robert Calloway set down his pen.
What happened next would later be described by Greta, the cook who had a clear sightline to booth 9 through the kitchen window, as the strangest thing she had ever seen in 40 years of watching people come and go through that diner. The man didn't deny it. He didn't pretend not to understand. He just looked at her. And for a moment, the billionaire CEO who had negotiated billion-dollar deals, who had sat across from senators and hedge fund managers and had never, not once, lost his composure in a professional setting, looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment for 32 years and had absolutely no idea what to do now that it had arrived. Maya slid into the booth across from him. She didn't ask permission. She just sat. Her hands were flat on the table. She told him her father's name. He confirmed it was his middle name, the one he had abandoned when he left. She asked if he had been to Cedar Falls before. He said yes, more times than he could count. She asked if he had ever come to find her. He said no. She asked why. He said he didn't think he had the right. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she told him about the house, how they lost it after he left, how her mother worked 3 jobs for 4 years, how Maya used to ride the bus home alone in the dark because there was no one to pick her up. She was 9 years old. She said she wasn't telling him this to hurt him. She was telling him because he should know. Because "I didn't think I had the right" is a story someone tells themselves so they don't have to feel things. Her mother didn't have the luxury of stories. She just had to do it. He did not defend himself. He said, "You're right." She asked him why he really left, the real reason, not the version he told himself. And after a silence so long she almost stood up and walked away, he told her. He had made a financial decision that cost people who trusted him a great deal of money. He was terrified of prosecution, so he ran. He changed his name. He rebuilt himself from nothing under a different identity. And by the time he was legally safe, by the time enough years had passed, he had told himself the best thing he could do for her and her mother was to stay gone. She asked if he had ever been prosecuted. He said the case fell apart. The charges were never filed. He had been free, legally free for 27 years, and he had spent every one of them convinced his past was still chasing him. She looked at him for a long time. Then she said, "So you ran for no reason, and we paid for it?" He said, "Yes." Here is the thing about forgiveness that no one tells you. It is not a door that swings open the moment you say the right words. It is more like a river, wide and slow, carved by time and erosion, and you don't always know it's happening until one day you look down and see that the landscape has changed. Maya Calloway sat across from her father in that diner booth for another 20 minutes. She did not forgive him that morning. She did not throw her arms around him. She did not cry, though she wanted to, and she was furious at herself for wanting to. What she did was talk. She told him about Theo, her son, his grandson, 4 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs, terrified of the dark, funny in the way that 4-year-olds can be funny, which is completely and accidentally and perfectly. She told him about school, business administration, a professor who told her she had a sharp financial mind, which had made her laugh bitterly because where had that come from? And Robert Calloway, who had sat across from presidents of companies and never shown emotion, sat across from his daughter and cried. Not dramatically, not in the way people cry in movies, just quietly, his jaw tightening, his eyes wet, one hand pressed flat to the table like he was trying to hold himself steady. Maya watched him. She didn't comfort him, but she didn't leave either. She told him she wasn't going to say everything was okay, because it wasn't, and she didn't know if it ever would be. But she also said she didn't want to spend the rest of her life being angry at someone who wasn't even in the room. He was here now, so she didn't know what happened next. He said neither did he. She told him that whatever he was, whatever he had built, none of it impressed her. She didn't care about the money or the company. If he wanted any part of her life, or Theo's, it had to be because he was willing to be present, not because he felt guilty, not to write a check and call it love. Present. He said he understood. She stood up, she picked up the check folder, then she looked down at the signature. Then she looked at him. "Your handwriting hasn't changed," she said quietly. And she walked back to the counter. She did not look back. She refilled a coffee for the couple in booth 6. Her hands were completely steady. Robert Calloway left a $200 tip on a $14.75 check. Maya left it on the table for 15 minutes before she picked it up. She almost left it. Then she thought about Theo and the electricity bill and picked it up. She didn't keep it for herself. She split it evenly with the cook and the dishwasher the way she always did with large tips. Robert drove back to Columbus that afternoon. He called his chief of staff and told her to clear his schedule for the following week. She asked why. He said, "I have something I should have done a long time ago." 3 days later, he returned to Cedar Falls. He called ahead this time. They met at a park near her apartment, a small place with a duck pond and benches painted green. She brought Theo. Theo, who had never met his grandfather, walked up to the silver-haired man on the bench, studied him with the absolute seriousness of a 4-year-old, and said, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Robert said he didn't know much about them, but he was willing to learn. Theo nodded as if this was an acceptable answer and climbed up onto the bench beside him. Maya stood a few feet away watching. She did not cry. She had decided she would allow herself to cry later, at home, alone, when Theo was asleep. She would sit on the kitchen floor with a cup of tea and let herself feel all of it. The grief, the anger, the terrible, complicated tenderness of a wound that had somehow, inexplicably, become a door. But in that moment, at the park, watching her son explain the differences between a T-Rex and a Spinosaurus to the man who had once been her father and might, in some still-forming future, be something like one again, in that moment, she breathed. I want to ask you something before we go. Think about the last time you assumed who someone was. The stranger at the coffee shop, the quiet customer at the end of the counter, the person who seemed too composed to be carrying something heavy. We walk past people every single day who are holding entire lifetimes behind their eyes. People who are running from something, people who have been run from, people who are waiting for a moment they don't know how to ask for. Maya Calloway didn't go looking for her father that morning. She went to work. She refilled coffee. She took an order. She brought a check. And the universe handed her the thing she had spent 32 years pretending she didn't need. Not neatly, not without pain, not wrapped in a bow, but real. And here is what I want you to hold on to as you go about your day. Healing is not a decision made in a single moment. It is 1,000 small decisions. To keep the check, to split the tip, to show up at the park, to answer the phone when it rings, to let someone learn about dinosaurs. It begins sometimes with a signature on a receipt and a voice that says, "Wait, I know that handwriting." If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And drop in the comments, have you ever had a moment where a stranger turned out to be someone you already knew? I'll see you in the next one.